Good afternoon. I'm Ben Sosny. I am the Executive Director of the Berkshire Innovation Center. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is session 4 of our class on transformative technologies. Berkshire Innovation Center is a member-based nonprofit organization here in the Berkshires that provides a world-class R&D facility and shared access to advanced technology for industry and academic partners. We're part of the Mass Life Science Center network and believe as our core philosophy in the power of collaboration and collective wisdom. Ellen Kennedy introduced me to Megan Wilden and a remarkable group from the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute about 18 months ago, and it's really grown into a remarkable and enjoyable partnership that I hope will continue. The group from OLLI told me that they wanted to do a major conference on transformative technologies and their impact on work and society. This was a absolutely perfect fit for the mission of the BIC, and we've been meeting regularly ever since. Obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to shift to a virtual platform, but the planning group has been persistent and relentless, and I would like to thank them for their efforts and for driving these important conversations. It's a remarkable organization and a remarkable group I've been working with. While I could continue to talk about the process we went through and our future plans and objectives, which we're already diving into, we have a limited time here and a really remarkable group of panelists and presenters today. I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator today, Doug Crane. Doug is the principal owner of the New Dalton Group, a business development consultancy, which he founded following a 30-year career at Crane & Co. He is an advisor to the cash program at the Federal Reserve Board, where he is supporting initiatives related to the U.S. currency program. During his career at Crane & Co., Doug spent the bulk of his time on the development and supply of high security products, overseeing multiple government contracts and managing several processes and product development programs. Doug is a member of the board of the Berkshire Innovation Center and the Berkshire Museum, and also advisor to the Massachusetts Manufacturing Innovation Institute. He acts as an advisor to several startup companies and as a limited partner in Q-Ball Capital, a venture firm in Boston. He earned a BS in biomedical engineering from Brown, an MS in paper chemistry from the Institute of Paper Science and Technology, and an MBA from the Sloan School at MIT. I would just like to say, as I mentioned there, Doug is a member of the board at the BIC. He was one of the first people I met when I took this role, and he is one of my favorite people. I will just say that, Doug. I could listen to Doug Crane all day, so let's just do that. Doug, thank you.
Thank goodness you don't have to. I'm nearly speechless, Ben, so we'll have to move on. Well, when I was asked to be part of this program today, I just couldn't believe my luck. I'm here to say that I've had the great good fortune to have worked in a manufacturing company, and it's true that we made a range of interesting and meaningful products. It is true that while the company no longer exists, that many of these products persist, albeit in very different circumstances. Crane & Company started here in Dalton in 1801 by a 22-year-old entrepreneur who had lost his father at age 2 to the revolution. He was a hard worker, and he was an experienced paper maker. And when he opened the company, he collected worn rags from the local towns, and he made paper by hand and sold it back into the community. Whatever his neighbors needed, he made: wrapping paper, writing paper, newspaper. And in 1806, he made his first currency paper for Berkshire Bank. He knew his customers intimately, and he knew his craft even more. He started to expand his business, adding a paper machine, increasing output to sell to Boston and New York, turning toward textile operations to purchase rags. His suppliers, like his customers, became more distant. Over the years, Crane had to evolve with demands and trends, and so a process of gradual reinvention of the company took hold, but it wasn't obvious. What was obvious was that the leaders of the business over time all shared a keen interest in their customers' needs, and they would adjust to meet these. There are fascinating stories of products and relationships that my ancestors were involved in. After 2,000 or so very famous failures, what did Edison finally use to make his first successful filament? Yes, it was a sheet of 100% cotton paper made here by Crane & Company. Now Crane is well known for the production of currency paper, but it is done in a way that my grandfather would not recognize. The flagship product today is the paper used to make the $100 bill, of which there are over 14 billion in circulation around the globe. By far, it is the most sought after banknote of our time. It is also one of the most secure banknotes as well, thanks in part to a security device based on complex micro-optic structures. This plastic strip is embedded into the paper in a custom production process, guided by machine vision systems. The strip itself is a marvel, sporting nearly 1 million lenses on each banknote. In summary, it is a highly technical product to make, and the process for doing so requires constant oversight by skilled and technically capable people. So you can say that I have a keen interest in manufacturing and in understanding the pieces that go into making it work. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all as we explore some of the issues and the opportunities that confront manufacturers today. So let me just turn to this bigger question of why is manufacturing important? In its most basic form, I look upon manufacturing as the conversion of raw materials with the application of energy, labor, and equipment to result in a more refined product. And in doing so, value is created. When manufacturing is consumed locally, it acts to redistribute resources, hopefully more efficiently. But when products are sold outside of a local area, the result is an influx of value back into the area, resulting in an incremental gain of prosperity. This is the power of manufacturing. In our era, we have witnessed an unprecedented event. In 1978, China took on an effort to reform its economy, and in the ensuing approximately 40 years, 850 million people have been lifted out of poverty. This was accomplished not by selling more agricultural crops, but a deliberate effort to expand the manufacturing output of the country, running trade surpluses and maintaining a 10% annual growth rate. This also spurred a massive migration from the rural regions to workers' dormitories located in manufacturing complexes. And it also took a tremendous environmental toll, which pretty much anyone can see who has the occasion to fly into Beijing. This was not market economics at work, however. It was made possible through the disciplined execution by a strong government. At first, only labor-intensive and low-tech operations went to China, but as these businesses succeeded, they were followed by increasingly more complex products. Simple electronics were joined by the production of flat panel displays, smartphones, photovoltaic cells, batteries. Eventually, much of the research that supports these products has also made its way to China. Consider one of today's most celebrated companies, Apple. Here's a company that logged $260 billion in sales last year. And they did so by essentially selling 4 products. The iPhone, about 45% of its sales. And then each at about 11% are the Mac, the iPad, and this class of wearables. And on top of that, of course, they had about 20% in services. They accomplished this by not actually making anything themselves. They did, however, design and tightly control the supply chain, but they have also taught their suppliers how to make complex products, and time will reveal if this was done at a cost. So welcome to now. What is our story going to be? Manufacturing in the US has shifted from 27% of our GDP in 1950, employing 31% of our workforce, to 12% of our GDP and 9% of the workforce in 2010. Why don't you go to the next slide there, Ben? In Berkshire County, manufacturing brings in the most revenue of any of the active sectors. It pays the highest wages, but it employs 12% of our workforce. I think we'd like to see more of it. So do we understand the challenge today? Do we have the conviction, and have we developed an effective strategy to rebuild our manufacturing sector for the future? Let's go to the next slide, Ben. Thank you. So there was a suggested book. I don't know how many people did their homework leading up to this, but this book, Producing Prosperity, came out in 2012, and it was highlighting a number of issues around manufacturing, sort of how it came to be and what was needed to be done in order to revitalize it and redevelop it. So a few points that came out of it was that manufacturing is not the manufacturing of yesterday, that it is inherently knowledge-based work. On top of that, in order to be effective going forward, there needs to be, a deliberate sort of strategy on the part of both management combined with government. And while this was written in 2012, I would also say it needs to be combined with the educational sector, that these are sort of three legs of a very powerful stool. Probably a bad analogy, but linked together, a triangle. There we go. So there's this conclusion in the book as well that manufacturing is as important to the innovation ecosystem as strong universities, R&D, and venture capital. If you go to the next slide. Just looking at the innovation ecosystem, I wanted to point out to folks, if they're interested, that there was some work done at MIT about innovation ecosystems and what it takes to build them. They generally just don't happen. Innovation in decades past always happened at corporate centers like Bell Labs or Xerox PARC. But today, corporations need to lean on research areas at universities linked together with some state support, but also the entrepreneurs play a very important role in this and being able to test out new frontiers and sort of commercialize opportunities for corporations to take over. So let's push on to the next slide, because it's a nice view of what we have here in our backyard. I'd like to transition a little bit and begin to introduce our panelists for today. You'll notice that on that previous slide on the ecosystem, that's essentially a private sector, public sector, and education. And today we are, oh, that's okay, Ben. I like the picture of the trees better. But we're very fortunate today to be joined by a diverse group that touches on many of these components. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So first up, I'm going to introduce Farhad Vazehgoo. I almost said it correctly, Farhad, sorry. Started his career designing semiconductor circuits and systems, and he earned his bachelor's degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Manchester in the UK. He's a senior IEEE member and currently holds the position of acting director for advanced manufacturing programs at the Innovation Institute at MassTech, or MassTech Technology for those, Mass Technology Collaborative for those who don't know that group, where he manages investments made under the Massachusetts Manufacturing Innovation Initiative, or M2I2, a program from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to advance innovation and job growth in key advanced manufacturing sectors. Farhad joined MassTech from his previous role as the Director of Technology and Functional Safety Products in the automotive business at Analog Devices. Prior to Analog Devices, he held various engineering positions with Fairchild Semiconductors, Kendall Square Research, and Tandem Computers, to name a few. He holds 3 patents and over 30 years of experience designing and managing the development of leading-edge circuits and systems for automotive and non-automotive applications. So Farhad, I was hoping that you could provide some of your thoughts on some of these broader topics of what role government can play in promoting manufacturing, and perhaps some of the challenges that you see manufacturing is facing today.
Well, Doug, thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be speaking at an OLLI event. My pleasure to talk about something that I'm passionate about. It's a great question. I think that after that great sort of background in manufacturing, Doug, it gives me a solid foundation to build on, hopefully. I see it's usually when we see government, excuse for all the other government people online, we start running. But I think in this case, we see that government has a role to play in supporting technologies. Not in the sense that I think, you know, again, Doug talked about the Gary Pisano and Felicia's book that they wrote and the article they wrote about that. It's not like we should not be looking as the role of the government as sort of investment, as being a venture capitalist, investing in a particular company versus a product, or more of investing in foundational technologies that are needed for the US to be competitive. So it's much bigger than one company or one product. I can point to a lot of areas in this case. The one that is vivid in my mind, and perhaps some of the folks who are attending this conference, is really the mission to the moon. In the 60s, we talked about, we want to put a man on the moon. And really this challenge spurred a lot of activity. This was a lot of investment on the government side, obviously, with NASA and so on and so forth. But really, what it did a transformational change in what it sort of followed through that. And everything that you see today in terms of semiconductor technology and the phone that you just talked about, Apple phone or anything, these are all the technologies that are made possible by those innovations that happen on the way to putting a man on the moon. So I see a big role for government to play in here in, I would say, put money on big bets. And so bringing that story and closer to home, closer to Massachusetts, you know, I work for a Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, or known as MassTech. In a way, it plays the same role for Massachusetts here. And what I mean by that, this is a unique state agency that tries to build a bridge between the industry and research. And really the goal of MassTech is to accelerate innovations and bring that innovation into products and enable manufacturing. And the reason is very simple for us. We looked at, you know, by innovations on its own doesn't create jobs. Innovation is an enabler, obviously. Manufacturing where all that secret sauce happens, and so on and so forth. And we see a role for MassTech plays in this sense that we have tools that available to help us in ushering the companies towards the success, if you want, they're looking for. And we do that by way of giving direct business assistance, giving grants and awards, and really more of a convening and a community building, which is really very important to that. And some of the clusters that we've focused on, these are, again, some of the big bets that we've been talking about, is that, for example, cybersecurity, digital health, and robotics, Internet of Things, AI, you name it. And there's a few of these that are running around that are foundational technologies. And obviously, advanced manufacturing is one of the ones that I want to talk to you about today. So if you can go to the next slide. So
Farhad,
really,
if I could interrupt you for a second, I just wanted to remind everyone out there that you may submit questions through the chat, which is going to be monitored. And then, so throughout, if you're having a question about that comes up about some of the topics here, please submit it, and it will get addressed when we're done with the presentations. Sorry, Farhad. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much for that reminder. Great. So we talk about manufacturing. I think there are some, obviously, as everyone here knows, and familiar with this, the age-old problem when we talk about manufacturing, we create an image in our head. And that necessarily it's not the reality today now. Obviously, there are many manufacturings that go on, and I don't want to lessen the impact of manufacturers, but I think what we see now is a lot of technological innovations that are happening. Just an example of that is that, any innovations and in manufacturing lead to innovations in next generation products. So really we need to be investing in technologies that enable manufacturing. And really what we want today's reality is the manufacturing you see on the left-hand side is completely different from what the image that we have about manufacturing in the yesteryears, if you will. So that sometimes creates a challenge for us to not promote, but get people into manufacturing, because manufacturing has got a lot of great jobs and good paying jobs and very impactful in terms of technology and supporting industries. So this is a challenge, that the dichotomy that we have is that whenever we talk about manufacturing, we have this split image in our head. And what I want to do is really talk about what is on the left-hand side today. That is the manufacturing. What is it today? Is it technology investment? So if you go to the next slide, please, Dan. So the challenge here is really get this negative connotation that we have about the 3Ds. And we talk about the 3Ds being dark, dirty, and dangerous. This is all the adjectives that you can look at that, people, when we talk about manufacturing, that's what they have the image on, as opposed to something that's what we call 3 S's, which is being it safe, smart, and sustainable. And so that is the image that we need to create. And at times it's very difficult, but I think we're making headways in changing that thinking by way of introducing innovations in manufacturing as opposed to manufacturing on its own. We look at what we want to do is move away the word from manufacturing to focus on manufacturing technologies and applications such as robotics, photonics. What are we doing? When somebody looks at a drone going above them, they're not talking about how it was made. They're talking about the drone. So we want to make sure that we change the message that manufacturing, yes, great, this is the method by which we make a product, but we want to make sure that we highlight the technologies that go into this. And some of the toolboxes that we need to have in order to, and really this message is the problem is coming up in the next slide, that really how do we attract students, high school students and people to manufacturing when you have this image in their head that's manufacturing is all about, dark and dirty and dangerous. If you can go to the next slide. Here's the challenge we have with the workforce challenge. We see right now, we have the great wave of retirement. These are people like myself. I'm just gonna stop there and not talk about anybody else. Doug raised his hand, but we can probably save to talk about Doug as well. But we are gonna be retiring, and folks who are manufacturing are gonna be retiring. We see a lot of retirement, but we don't see a lot of people coming on to manufacturing. And the message here is that, again, it goes back to this image that we have in our head, that the 3Ds, and what we need to do is reach out to high school kids, and more importantly, to their parents, and the guidance counselor, to let them know that the manufacturing today is different than what it was yesterday. And these technologies that the kids are all excited about, Twitter, Instagram, all of these are made by technologies that have been invested in manufacturing as well as the product. So it's a difficult, this gap for trained technicians is getting larger and larger. What we need to do is reduce this gap. And we're going to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing and what the state is doing in order to do that. If you can go to the next slide. So we have a manufacturing training program that across the four regions of Massachusetts, that focuses on the training, providing training for fundamental manufacturing expertise, if you will. And these are really what I call the core competencies that are needed to get into manufacturing. And these areas that we're looking at basically at four regions, and the Berkshire and Pioneer Valley is one of the areas. We have the Central, Northeast, and Southeast. And each one of these are aligned with Mass Hire boards and collectively look at various requirements and the needs that are sometimes are expressed in regional terms as opposed to statewide. So this is some effort that is going on. And we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks, we will have some exciting news about the other programs that we'll be announcing that really ties this regional collaboration that we have to something that's bigger and much more exciting as well. If you can go to the next slide, please. So Doug talked about the M2I2. This is one of the programs that we have that we're using to sort of, if you will, jumpstart or encourage activity in innovation area. And it is, as the title says, is Manufacturing Innovation Initiative. This effort is tied to the Manufacturing USA initiative. This initiative was born during the previous administration, where the discussion happened was that we want to re-energize manufacturing. And how do we do that? By creating these manufacturing institutes that will solely focus on the sectors, on various sectors. So there are 14 of these institutes, and each one of these institutes set up to focus on bringing back manufacturing or creating innovations in that sector. One thing that I must tip my hat to the Governor Baker and the state legislator, they had the foresight to look at it and say, we want to be leading this effort as well in the state. And they put $100 million towards that initiative, which is a nationally leading commitment by any state. And when we look at other states, we've seen, in tens of million dollars, maybe at most $20 million, and our closest are New York State. But we by far outmatch any investment that any other state missed. And this goes to the foresight and the vision that Governor Baker and the state legislature had that. And that $100 million is towards, as I mentioned, there are 14 institutes. That $100 million is towards 4 of these institutes. Actually, we're showing 5 institutes, and I'll tell you why that is. But the 4 institutes that we support are Advanced Functional Fabrics. The institute focuses on wearable technology and any technology that can be embedded into textile. AIM Photonics is the application of Photonic. We just talked about the era of semiconductor, how that propelled all the computing and the laptops and everything that we see today, and what Photonics would be doing for our application. And we're increasingly looking for faster and faster internet speeds. Well, and that is going to be possible Photonic, using photons in order to move bits of information instead of electrons. So as the Photonics, the ARM is basically self-explanatory, focuses on, excuse me, on the application of robotics and in automation and various applications. NextFlex, it focuses on hybrid electronics, flexible hybrid electronics. So these technologies are really suited for application of electronics on surfaces that may not be conformal. So you can think of a patch for a monitoring of your health, you have a device or a patch you put on your skin, and we want to put electronics, so that NextFlex focuses on that. So between those 4 institutes, there are $93 million have been invested or designated for that. And the other 20 million, so that makes up greater than 100 million, but the only 20 million is really overseen by Nimble, which is focused on biomanufacturing technologies. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the type of grants that the M2I2 supports really fall into two categories. There's the what we call the business expansion grants and the training and education grants. Really, the focus today is more on the training and education grants. But there are, for those people who are out there thinking about, hey, I would like to participate in this grant type. There are the grants also support businesses, and but the focus, while the ecosystem is pretty rich in terms of SMEs and OEMs and other companies, the focus of our M2I2 grant is on SMEs. We feel that SMEs play a big role, and not we feel, we see they play a big role, and they enable companies and innovative products. So we target companies to provide capital grants in order to mobilize them to create the next set of products, manufacture the next set of products, if you will. On the training side, we feel that as we promote these new and great technology, like for example, photonics, we really need to have the education to go along with it. We need to have an educated workforce, what that technology is about. And so we have come up with investments that we've made in discovery centers, where these centers are dedicated space for companies to design and prototype and pilot new products. And another one is a lab for education application prototypes, we affably known as LEAP. These are the dedicated facilities for prototyping also, but they focus on photonics. So I wanted to show you a little bit of examples of what we're doing today in that area. But training and education is a key element of M2I2 and goes hand in hand with the innovations that we need to support that are being worked on at academic institutions as well as SMEs. You can go to the next slide, please. So what is LEAP about? This concept was born from the AIM Photonics. We came up with the idea that what we want to do, the LEAP, the AIM Photonics Institute is actually in Albany, New York, and their workforce development and an educational arm is actually based at MIT. So the idea here was really to create a corridor along the I-90 corridor between Boston all the way to Albany, and create these centers that will invigorate and accelerate the development of photonic applications. This is just one example of programs that we're supporting. And again, these centers are all about teaching integrated talking about application of photonics in addressing problems, and as well as training, and also in space for industry and academia to work together on the next generation of products and technologies, if you will. So if you can go to the next slide. So what I wanted to share with you is that these are couple of pictures of the photonic integrated circuits, and while it's being tested actually. So as an ASIC, which is normally everybody thinks about it as a application specific integrated circuit, which is everybody thinks about as being electronics, and that's true, primarily that. Now this one is PIC, which stands for Photonic Integrated Circuits. And these technologies are still very new, but the application of photonics is very, very clear to us, because right now the data centers are pretty power hungry, and they do not have the efficiency of the electronics. So what we're trying to do is convert these data centers, which enable the faster internet that we are looking for everywhere, for example, is to invest in photonics and the application of photonics in power of those things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Ben for you to show a 1.5 minute video that talks about these centers that I've been mentioning here.
While Ben's teeing that up, I will just say that an SME is a small and medium-sized enterprise.
MIT Leap, which
Thank
is
you.
a part of AIM Photonics Academy. Our charter is to educate students and incumbent company employees as we prepare them for the next generation jobs in integrated photonics. This MIT Leap is the first of many leaps across the I-90 corridor, all the way from Boston to Rochester, New York. The I-90 Partnership is a broad coalition consisting of several groups. The capital investment for the leaps is funded by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and operation is supported by research and industry prototyping activities. The leaps have two main goals. One is demonstration of prototypes, which shows initial proof of manufacturing. And the second is creation of high-tech integrated photonic jobs. Larger scale manufacturing will be done by the nanofabrication facility at SUNY Polytechnic Institute in Albany, and also by the test and packaging facilities in Rochester, New York. MIT Leap will focus on packaging of integrated photonic components, and we welcome you to MIT Leap. The MIT.
So thank you, Ben, for sharing that video. I thought this would be a good opportunity for you to have a look to see what is being done in here and for these centers. And I think gives you an insight as to the type of work that's going on. And I think more importantly, I wanted to sort of point out the collaboration that's happening between all these entities and bringing on students on campus and showing them what's going on. And MIT has played a big role in this, and so on others. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we've been talking about these LEAP sites in Massachusetts. And so what I'm showing here is really the centers that we have put in place and we have funded. We have a couple of down in Southeast, in Easton and Bridgewater University and Stonehill College got together, and we have two centers in that area. Obviously, MIT was the first site, and we have one in Worcester at WPI, and a collaboration between WPI and QCC, that's in Worcester. And then one is also, we will be soon announcing one in Springfield area. So this is I'm excited that this is teed up, and we'll be announcing those centers in very shortly on that. You can go to the next slide. So I guess what I want to do is close my portion of this is what is the future of manufacturing? I think this was really the title of the session today. And really what I wanted to show here is that there is really three vectors here that we need to be aware of. We need to have a connected innovation ecosystem. We just talked about a lot of the innovations that are required and create pathways that we want to create for ecosystem to connect with manufacturing. And there will be, as I said earlier, there will be, we're going to be announcing great new programs in the next couple of weeks that will go a long ways to connect this innovation ecosystem. The other part of it was really a competitive supply chain. During this pandemic, we've seen what disruptions that has been created for our supply chain. What we wanted to understand is make sure that the competitive, we have a reliable supply chain. We have something that is resilient to any disruption, if you will, as well as accessible by smaller companies, the SMEs. Which make them more competitive with bigger companies and abroad. And really, last but not least, is really the talent is connecting the circle. You know, what we're doing to educate tomorrow's workforce. That is really the biggest challenge for us, given the sort of the landscape I showed you before, is that we need to promote manufacturing like never before. And by that I mean is that we've got to move away from the 3Ds to 3Ss and promote the technologies and applications that go with that. So with that, I hope I've given you a sense of what we're doing, where we're going, and what programs we have.
Thanks, Farhad. You certainly said a mouthful. There's an awful lot of work underway, it's nearly terraforming is what you're up to here. It's pretty incredible. So I'm thinking that we should maybe focus in a little bit on the educational side of things and ask our next guest to step up to the stage here. Jeffrey Morse is the director of the Advanced Print and Roll-to-Roll Fabrication Facility, a new core facility at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences at UMass Amherst. Previously, Morse was a senior scientist at the Center for Micro and Nanotechnology at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He received his BS and MS degrees in electrical engineering from UMass and a PhD in 1992 in electrical engineering from Stanford. His interests and expertise includes wearables and printed electronics, advanced micro and nano fabrication processes, microelectromechanical systems, or MEMS, biosensors, microfluidics, micropower sources. He currently leads several programs in the development of wearable platforms for monitoring biometric and biomarker signatures. Jeff is right there on the bleeding edge of developing technology, but developing real world applications for it. I'm very excited he's able to join us today. And so Jeff, I guess, since you are running a facility that's targeted toward developing these technologies, but also developing the workforce, I'm hoping you can provide us with some ideas on how things are going at your particular, I'll call it lab, your facility, and also see if you can talk to us a little bit about the intersections of healthcare and energy, automotive and entertainment, and environmental industries with printed electronics. Okay. So take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Doug. So I'm coming from an academic institution, and I'm gonna kind of give some specific examples of what we're doing at UMass Amherst. Many of the both state and private institutions around the Commonwealth have similar programs, and I think I can put it in context of what Farhad just spoke about. We're really at the intersection here of kind of some of those images and graphics he showed, where we're really looking at translation of the research going on to the needs for industry and application areas. This facility that I direct is a industry user facility. It was funded through a grant from the state and the Mass Life Sciences Council with the targeted objective of economic impact, particularly in the western part of the state, which is our location, but more broadly to the complete region and Commonwealth. And so I'll talk specifically about what we're doing and the impact we're making, both from the standpoint of education, workforce training, as well as how we can accelerate or propel industry, mostly small startups, but also medium. And we've worked with many large companies on shared projects as well, and how we can help bring about their efforts to get new technologies out there more rapidly and more competitively, if you will. So next slide, please. So as mentioned, this is an industry user facility. This is kind of new in concept, not from the standpoint of general industry user facilities. I've worked at many at my time on the West Coast in California. Stanford University, MIT has a great one. Harvard has a great one in the microfabrication and microtechnology area. We began looking what could we do on campus at UMass Amherst that would be both high impact to the region and the Commonwealth, as well as translation of some of the technology both in materials science, polymer science, things that have been going on there. But also as we saw some of our core research capabilities combined with some of the more historical capabilities within the Commonwealth. There's a rich history of print and coatings and roll-to-roll processing. A lot of that comes from the paper industry, as Doug mentioned. So there's a lot of paper mills, paper companies around, and truly they are mills. But if you go to them and you look at what they're doing from the context of starting with a raw feedstock to something that comes out not that far down the pathway to a very refined product. It's amazing just that they can do that. And some of the stuff is 100 years old or more. Now it's more print electronics, coatings. The example is historically Polaroid was huge many years ago, running some processes that are still nothing to compare them to. What they did, a bunch of people that worked together, technologists, and a lot of that was learning by doing. Certainly a lot of material science and PhDs involved in that, but they did things that even people today don't fully understand how it was done. And that's a legacy that still exists around, and those people have that knowledge base. So what we brought together in our facility at UMass Amherst is a suite of roll-to-roll and coating tools to advance materials and coatings. And that industry, I can talk a little bit about that. And then more specifically focusing on the emerging print electronics industry. So that is the ability to print and pattern conductors, insulators, active components, passive components on flexible substrates, and then bring in other levels of integration, adding silicon ICs, making them hybrid electronics, and adding other functionality to them. And so that's where a lot of the translation from research going on in the academic environment to what are the future needs, both in application spaces as well as where industry is at. And in many cases, industry comes to us because they are wanting to make that next step. It's a big investment to them to either buy equipment or go out and work with bigger vendors out there or contract manufacturing, because you dilute intellectual property, you dilute innovation, and it's also not cheap. So if you're a small company and really want to get off the ground with something that's very innovative, you really want to work in an environment where you can get your hands on there and or work with experienced staff and personnel that can help accelerate your technology. So here on the left in this slide, we have a lot of our equipment that's in our lab now and operating. Some of that is very emerging and very state-of-the-art, and others are just more workhorse capability that companies look to us to come and do trial runs, mostly in the coatings area, but really trying to develop their next product. On the right side, we just show some of the translational areas and applications that have come out, mainly from the Jim Watkins group in polymer science at UMass, and several other groups on campus have contributed to this, but areas including patterning of new and unique materials. A lot of that is for printed optics and photonics, so that's supportive of initiatives like AIM. Printed microfluidics, printed hybrid electronics. Those are more supportive in the areas such as NextFlex from the Manufacturing USA environments, and printed batteries and structural functional surfaces. Those are all new applications that we're going to see structural color, artificial, and other types of applications for imaging, for gaming, for other future products that we're going to see coming out. So it's very exciting stuff, but also it goes back with a core materials background and then a processing and manufacturing background that has deep roots of history in the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. So again, really, how do we translate the science, taking advantage of the knowledge that the students, the PhD students, grad students, postdocs, and faculty bring. And so this is kind of the platform to do that. And this is that intersection between industry needs and commercial needs and what academia can do. Again, this facility is probably the most comprehensive of its kind worldwide at an academic institution. at this point, or at least one of the top handful. And it really is something where we have dedicated staff that come out of industry, and then we work both with the students on campus. We're working with several other universities on projects, and we have multiple companies working with us on trials for their products. And again, these are both large and small companies. And then we do kind of at the development stage, we'll work with companies on their new concepts where we can bring some of our capability to bear to demonstrate that they can do this, and then they can scale it to a manufacturing platform where once we demonstrate that, they can then go to the next level by finding contract manufacturing capability. So in many cases, a lot of this equipment is available at other commercial entities, but you can do a lot of development and go through a lot of material and a lot of time before you optimize that. So that's the kind of the stepping stone that we provide. You come work with us with kind of that background knowledge. You can get your hands on in the process and trial development activities, and really focus on your needs before you go to that more scalable approach and work with those companies and people. So next slide, please. And so we've taken on, in one context, we're doing, with some commercial piece of equipment that we've acquired, coatings and materials development activities with companies. And that's probably our biggest area of focus right now, where small companies and even some large companies have come to us because they don't want to take down a line when they're developing their next material. And we can work with them very rapidly and very efficiently to work through their issues, look at a lot of different compositions of the materials and different aspects of integration or what the final product needs to look like and needs to perform like. From that standpoint, we're impacting companies that are working in batteries. They are working in filtration, which is kind of an area of environmental and energy. We have done some work in printed optics and photonics and structural color. So we can bring to bear a lot of our capability to make that specialty film, and working with the researchers and companies that come to us. A bigger area that we've have gone into now is printed electronics. And so that's really using a variety of patterning capability, whether it's direct write, such as inkjet printing, or patterning using screen print or other gravure. Flexo, again, has been around in the graphics industry for many, many years, but now applying it to printed conductors, printed passives and active components, and then working through the aspect of integration, which is really the challenge for the printed electronics. You want more and more sophisticated technologies, capabilities that all can be printed in a continuous line, like I show here on this graphic, where you can coat, you can treat the substrate, you can pattern, you can dry, you can then go to the next step of adding and printing and patterning. And this line is not as comprehensive as some of these might be. And these we've seen some of these where you might get something that's 100 feet long and would take up a very large area, but it's continuous processing. So you really can now get more sophisticated, more intelligent products, all integrated within one kind of one pass or one multiple pass in a continuous manner. So we bring to bear a lot of that capability and a lot of that engineering. Some of it comes from the semiconductor and silicon IC conceptual ideas. We're now just doing it at a different scale and different substrate materials. Next slide, please. And so one area, as mentioned, is wearables. This demonstrator project I'm going to talk about a little bit. Conceptually, what's needed here is kind of body area networks, to put it kind of succinctly about what you're trying to do. So what you want is some capability that you can wear, and that capability is flexible. Nominally, it's a patch, like a large Band-Aid, and it's going to have different types of electronics on there that can acquire signal, it can process that data, and it can either store it or transmit that out, Possibly there's a display where you can visualize that information in real time for your own needs, or you can send that out wirelessly, whether that's to your phone, which can process it, or to some other database that's being stored. Many products already in the market like this, the wearable watches, wearable patches of some sort, but I'm not sure how sophisticated they are. A lot of them you might wear with a compression band rather than a patch. But again, those will evolve over time with more levels of sophistication. But here you want to look at different things. Right now, it's probably looking at heart rate. It's probably looking at respiratory. Ultimately, you want to get skin temperature, body temperature, blood pressure. Ideally, would be great to have. ECG and respiration, as I mentioned, probably already exist. But again, the real issue is how do you use this information? This is the big area where transitioning into weekend warrior and activity monitoring to real healthcare is problematic from the standpoint of data accuracy, data repeatability, other motion and other artifacts that can come up. These are all challenges. So this is not just simple sensors in production. It's coming up with something that is more of an integrated system that can deal with other external environmental issues that can come up and make this data erroneous or make it more problematic if you need to make medical decisions based on that. So that's certainly an area. And then you approach regulatory and other aspects. So companies are working through this, products are working through this. We are seeing advancement, which is encouraging. But again, it'll take time to get that level of, what type of decision making, doctors, medical professionals, they like this, but on the other hand, they are responsible for all data that crosses their desks. So these things can generate a lot of data over a short time. And so you really got to understand, how you want to manage this, how you want to deal with it. So those will evolve, and we will come up with better conceptual ways that we can practice healthcare, practice our own activity monitoring, and make decisions based on this. So very exciting. So next slide, please.
Jeff, as we're kind of moving through this, I was just going to recommend that we consolidate things and move on to our next speakers if we can soon.
Okay.
We're a little behind on time.
All right, I'll be real quick here then. So, so there's just some examples of other commercial things that we've seen. None of these have turned into existing commercial products. What you are seeing now, I see it on TV, a wearable glucose sensor where you do a near field scan periodically. You wear it permanently for maybe 2 weeks or longer. It does have a little needle that goes in and takes blood sensing, and then wirelessly transmit that to your phone. Next slide, please. And so again, going from basic function on the left here, which is a simple unintelligent sensor like I just described for the new blood glucose monitoring wearable applications, to more sophisticated with intelligence, requires increasing levels of integration where you can incorporate silicon ICs and chips onto this to do some of your electronic processing and so on, and then eventually more integrated through the print and roll-to-roll processes that I've discussed. And so this is kind of just a representation of that. If we go to the next slide, we've already done some aspects of this, but again, to get to that fully intelligent patches and wearables is still an emerging, and visions of that and some of the other regulatory issues all are part of the process. But the bottom line is you can take little patches, Band-Aid-like things. We can do printed microfluidics that can acquire sample, whether that's blood or sweat or other sources. We can integrate electronics with those. We can make those flexible with a bandage, and we can also make near-field antennas printed on those so you can literally scan that. And again, this is not something that has a lot of intelligent electronics, so you can use your iPhone or other phone, smartphone, to scan that, get the data, store it. Your phone can do the processing. Eventually, as I mentioned, more electronics will be integrated. So this is just one example of a wearable application. Next slide, please. And again, these are just examples of something. This is an ECG monitor, fully printed. We do integrate 2 or 3 silicon ICs on this, and then we can wear this and measure heart rate directly. We show both a heart rate simulator as well as real data in red there. And again, this is fully printed with, I think, 3 silicon ICs hybridly integrated onto this. And so this is just something we've done at UMass, and there's even more sophisticated examples out there. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's about it for me. So I think the point is that you now take this kind of new area of manufacturing in kind of the print and coding area. You can now add additional functionality. You can lower the cost from the education workforce training standpoint. This now is a new area where you're bringing different areas of engineering and science behind it. So technical jobs, technical opportunities are going to be emerging. We are looking to develop both short courses as well as full curricula at UMass that is more focused in this space. And again, is multidisciplinary in nature. So I think that is something that we're going to see some areas in the Commonwealth as well as in the US overall in terms of new manufacturing opportunities and jobs, and the technical and engineering support that will make this very successful, and reshore and bring back job opportunities and manufacturing opportunities to this country in this area.
Thank you, Jeff. That's certainly an awful lot going on there. It's not your sort of historical view of the chemistry lab at university anymore. It's hands-on prototyping and really advancing the state of the art, and it's wonderful to see. I will also note that UMass Amherst is a member of the BIC here as well, and so sort of continuing the role of the Innovation Center here and how it serves to connect industry with academia. It's a vital activity. And speaking of industry, and we're going to hear now from Justin McKinnon. Justin's a principal scientist at Electromagnetic Applications. We hear a lot about electromagnetic applications in the news in the Berkshires as EMA, so that's what it stands for when you see it. He's an industry recognized leader in understanding and simulating. EMA is an industry leading entity in the understanding and simulating the effects of lightning and other electromagnetic effects. He's published dozens of papers and been an invited speaker at numerous conferences and events. He obtained his bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from the University of Massachusetts. Again, UMass. He holds an FAA designated engineering representative license and all lightning disciplines. His area of expertise are in lightning effects on aircraft, wind turbines, systems, finite element analysis, aircraft certification, and electromagnetic effects. He has previously worked for large defense contractors and recently served as chief engineer of NTS Lightning Technologies. Justin, while EMA is an established company, you folks seem to be leading an effort that looks a little bit like a startup here at the BIC. And you're developing an entirely new frontier for enabling the development of materials and devices destined for space. Can you describe how EMA recognizes opportunity and how it's being managed? And can you highlight any technologies that are important to your realizing your vision? And I'll be quiet. And thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Doug. So one of the things that was really interesting about the journey that we've kind of taken to get here is that we were already operating in this industry. It was a kind of a perfect parallel to the types of projects that we were already on. We've been on the Orion program since about 2008, helping them solve electromagnetic effects problems. And so kind of stepping into the realm of understanding the effects of space radiation and things like that has been kind of a natural progression for us. And really, we saw a gap in what the industry was able to provide because we were feeling the problems ourselves. We frequently ran into issues where we wish we had data. We would run calculations and we had no way to know if they were correct or not. And it just became clear to us that nobody else was going to do it because it's a really hard problem. And we also realized that the industry really needed that, given that it's kind of embodying the new brand of manufacturing that a lot of the industry participants are really starting to recognize, where rather than the manufacturing of old, where you have assembly lines and thousands of identical projects and products being, built and replicated, more of your traditional manufacturing, or as Doug mentioned, the printing of money, you'd like ideally for those to look similar to one another, whereas everything that goes to space has its own fingerprint and it's a little bit unique. And that's what we call, kind of an HVLV manufacturing model, or high value, low volume. And so for us, we saw that there's really no access to space terrestrially here, right? So if I'm going to send $1 billion satellite millions and millions of miles away, I'd like to have some understanding that it works without having to send it millions and millions of miles away. In analogous industries there, you have aerospace chambers and aerospace test facilities that test airplanes. And if you have a problem with an airplane, there's a lot of mechanisms to land it and bring it back and fix it, but not in space. If it's out there and it breaks, it's pretty much gone. And so one of the things that's really been kind of interesting for us is how we've participated in the industry alongside developing this technology, where we're building it to solve problems that we face on our own on a day-to-day basis, and also trying to future-proof it based on our exposure to a lot of the other types of industry growth that we're seeing here. So to kind of talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing there, I think Doug mentioned that, I'm sure you guys, if you're local here, you at least hear a little bit about what we're doing here. But I like to think that this new type of manufacturing is something that hopefully is a model that really translates well across other sectors, where rather than, again, building things and building them in large quantities, we're taking and creating jobs and opportunities and technologies that require a blend of expertise. It's not the day where you have one person that knows what's going on in the manufacturing plant, whether we have a team that comprises a lot of multidisciplinary talents of, physics and material science and computer programming and electrical engineering, and rather than just simply operating the equipment. And in fact, I would argue that you can't operate the equipment without those backgrounds there. And it's all due to just kind of the complexity of where the industry is going. And so if you're a startup company, if you have a technology that likes to go to space, you have really a limited window to be relevant. And so our goal with this project was to give them a way to demonstrate what they're doing is viable before they kind of miss their opportunity there. If you go to the next slide. So to do that, we're looking at different uses in space. So you have different materials, you have different technologies that have never been built before, that have never been used, or going to planets we've never been to before, and hopefully further than that. And so we're also realizing a different set of risks every time that we do a space mission. You see launches getting canceled for certain reasons, and that's on a whole different scale than the types of risks that you get in space. At least, on ground, again, you can not launch and then launch another day. But when you run into something in space, if it's something gets hit by an asteroid, well, that's just a bad day. But if it's, radiation from the sun, or if it's something about the environment up there that kind of compromises how you operate, it really is a predictable problem, and one that you should be able to test. And so with our chamber, one of the things that we needed to make sure that we can do is allow for materials to be developed. If you want to 3D print a new material and you want to use it in space there, NASA's not just going to take your word that it's going to work. You need to show them that it's not much risk adding your capability to their platform. And once you're able to break through that, you really are able to get a lot of traction and do a lot of really exciting things. So this is kind of a mock-up of our chamber here. And what we're doing is taking different, we call them radiation sources, but they're really not too different from incandescent light bulbs, and boiling electrons off of filaments under vacuum and then accelerating them in materials. And that's exactly what happens in space. And so in doing so, we're able to take satellites and solar panels and flexible electronics and physically test them, and all the while developing technologies that don't exist. And that's really where our spin on manufacturing comes. If you go to the next slide. we're not the only people interested in this. And it was really kind of an exciting revelation for us that we're building this selfishly for our own reasons, right? We like to test things and we like to study them and run simulations and kind of fit our current business model. But all the other research and development centers at NASA, at the Air Force, at SpaceX, at Blue Origin, at the satellite manufacturers, they need this capability. And with ours being the only commercial chamber, I mean, we're already seeing quite an influx of interest in what we're doing here. But we know that there's a hard limit. These tests, they take time, right? You have space missions that are on the order of decades in some cases. So you can only accelerate them so much to get really reliable data out of it. So we've geared ourselves up to be able to make these for other people. And it's a really exciting capability because not only do we get to develop a new technology, we get to develop, really state-of-the-art processes to develop these high-value, low-volume projects like this. So go to the next slide. Some of these are including the size of their chamber that we're doing here. So a lot of the other chambers are a lot smaller, and they're again, as I mentioned, really kind of set up for research and development. So you have some folks at NASA and at the Air Force and at a couple academic institutions that like to do research in here. But what are you supposed to do if you're trying to develop a new satellite technology and you really don't have a way to accurately evaluate it? As if you're using venture capital or something like that and you have an error or an issue in one of your first launches there, your whole company's gone. So doing it here is a lot cheaper, a lot faster. And it's required us to really think outside the box with how we're going to be as flexible as we can while making this a commercially viable operation for ourselves. And so here's kind of what we've designed and built over the last multiple years here. And so it's been quite an exercise in leveraging what is physically capable from an existing manufacturing standpoint, and at the same time trying to juggle the new technologies that we need to develop here. And it's very rare that a company has to deal with both sides of the equation like this, but like most of it there, we tend to pioneer in areas that we're not even aware that we're pioneering in. It's very uncommon for a company to manufacture and use the things that it manufactures at the same time here. So if we make any bad design choices, we're the ones that also have to yell at ourselves for it there. So it puts a lot of onus on us to develop and make things that are sound and they work and they don't have to be kind of a Frankenstein implementation from a process and a usability standpoint, but at the same time create them flexible so that other people can use them as well. Next slide. So to kind of wrap up my piece here, manufacturing is unique to us because it's a supplement to our other lines of business. So we develop these technologies out of a need for our own sake and realizing that we work on really, really big programs in a lot of really cool areas. And those companies themselves are very interested in having these capabilities. And so rather than keep the secret sauce to ourselves, we decided that, at our home here in the Innovation Center, we're going to not only do these tests, because we're really good at them and we know the data really well, but also make the pieces of equipment and the test fixtures and the test devices to provide those to other folks. And, as the volume of space-related technologies continues to increase, there's a lot more companies employing this HVLV model for manufacturing processes. And that's from NASA across commercial, private industries, and everything in between.
Great. Well, thank you for that glimpse, Justin. I would like to also invite Brianna to say a few words. We're actually starting to run a bit tight on time, Brianna, so I may ask you to be as brief as possible to get your various messages across. But to introduce you to the group here, Brianna Schaefer is the Vice President of Program Management at Boyd Tech in Lee, where she's been for 6 years. She's a graduate of Pittsfield High School and Western New England University, where she earned a degree in biomedical engineering and medical engineering. She earned an MBA from Western New England University as well. And she has always had a passion for developing innovative technologies in the medical and life sciences industries. She's enjoyed the opportunity to work with startups and small to medium-sized businesses. At these organizations, she has contributed and led the development of disruptive technologies and services. Brianna believes that disruption is a foundation of innovation and looks forward to continued growth of these technologies. So Brianna, you work in a company that used to offer converting services to the paper industry. Today, Boyd Tech is very active in medical products. You're also at the, sort of beginning stages of your career, in contrast to a lot of us on the computer today. And I think we'd be interested to hear some of your journey that led you to take up a career in manufacturing. So I'll just hold up there and let you launch. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I like to think, I might not have said this when I was growing up, but I think I grew up in a really interesting time in the county. I grew up in Pittsfield, kind of right after GE had left the area. And so growing up, there was a lot of talk about people leaving the area, businesses leaving the area. And as I started to move into high school, there was this mentality of, nothing's left in the area and you have to go somewhere to do anything, to start a career. So as I got into high school, there wasn't really a lot offered in learning about manufacturing. I had a lot of strengths in math and science, and my thought was, I'm from a family of doctors, I'm gonna go be a doctor. Saw how long that schooling was and said, that's not for me, and started to do some of my own research and found biomedical engineering, which really fulfilled my desire to help people, but also stay in that medical field and apply those math and science skills, but definitely something that I had to search out on my own. So I found a degree at Western New England University, went through my time there where we got a lot more exposure to manufacturing, and through the Mass Life Sciences Internship Challenge, which is a great program that we still use here at Boyd Technologies, I was introduced to the company. I didn't go through with the internship that summer, but it helped me make that connection locally. Boyd was not a company that I knew of at the time. So it really, we make a lot of strong connections that way. And a lot of times have local residents who come back and work for us through that program. And so I stayed connected with Boyd. And the next year I was graduating from college and was offered a unique opportunity here. I like to think it was kind of fate when I was introduced to Boyd, because it was right at that pivotal time where we started to really transition into medical. And Boyd probably wouldn't have been a fit for me without the medical and life science focus with my degree. And family's a really huge deal to me, and I wanted to stay close to home. So after weighing my options of a few different opportunities, I decided to pursue Boyd. What really interested me in manufacturing was I love the idea of the application of science and seeing results of real world problem solving, which is something that I think is really intriguing, especially to a generation so focused on technology being integrated into our lives. So I think one thing that the county has done a really good job of since my time in high school is introducing students to the different manufacturing companies in the area. I think the companies are also doing a really good job getting their names out, connecting to the high schools. We almost always have a high school intern here now, so they get to kind of get their hands dirty, not in the 3D way, but they get to kind of come in, experience the quality side of things, the engineering side, and they're really surprised what innovative things are going on here, and I think kind of sparks that interest that, hey, I can go into engineering and I can still stay close to home. So jumping into a little bit about Boyd real quick. So first, a little bit on Boyd. We're a contract manufacturer. Doug kind of mentioned we had a legacy history in the paper manufacturing industry, and in the last 15 or so years have made a strategic shift to focus in medical device and life sciences. And we are, as I said, a contract manufacturer, so we do not brand anything our own. We make products to specification for our customers, and it keeps everything really exciting because we're always solving different problems for our customers. And so in these slides here, This is a product in the blood and plasma thawing space. So where we are situated in our business, being a single-use manufacturer, we tend to complement rigid or hard devices and create the disposable that integrates into that device. So what these bags are here they have sensors on them, and what happens is you can see in this picture there's some hinges that we are sealing to the bag with a thermal impulse welder, and the frozen plasma will go into these bags, or the blood will go into these bags, and we get to actually integrate some smart technology. At the bottom of the bags you can see there's a sensor, and so what we do is we help with this integration where the bag goes into the rigid device, and what it does is it very systematically heats up the plasma in a much more controlled way so that proteins are not denaturing. So if we continue along, that's a picture of the device with some fluid in a plasma-like bag, just so you can get a sense of that. And then the final piece, what was an interesting challenge for us is this video where we get to have this interesting place in the supply chain where a lot of customers will work with product development houses, and sometimes what the product development house creates as a process does not always translate as easily as we would like to think. And so we are able to get the video going. We actually created a really unique solution. So you can see the sensors coming in at the top of the screen. And one thing that the product development house didn't kind of take into consideration is the flow and orientation of the sensor on the bag. So what you see here is we had to figure out a creative and innovative way to rotate the sensors 90 degrees so that they were placed in the correct orientation on the bag. So through some tooling, the cylinder, as it rotates kind of down web, there's a set of gears inside of this tool that takes the sensor and vacuums it onto the black piece that you saw before. And then as the cylinder rotates, the black area in the vacuum actually also rotates the sensor itself. So just kind of an example of some unique challenges that we get to solve as we go through project to project. So that's kind of a little bit about Boyd. We always get to solve kind of unique challenges, and I think you know, myself here at Boyd and some of the companies around us have had an opportunity to kind of integrate local young people into the industry, and so it's been a really great opportunity here.
Thank you very much. I would like to now open things up a little bit, and I think there's some questions perhaps that are being sorted through. There's our question master. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks so much, Doug, and everyone. This has been eye-opening. You know, I just jotted down a couple of thoughts here, and we have a few questions to get to. One for me now, manufacturing equals tech. I mean, that's talk about productivity expansion, economic development. There's a whole generation, a new wave coming that is here and accelerating. And this collaborative ecosystem across the academic spheres, government, and private sector really struck me. And there's a few questions about that I'm going to bundle up here. And finally, this has just been great examples of how here in the Berkshires, key businesses are thriving around this smart advanced manufacturing sector. It's been very educational. They're kind of two categories that the questions came in. One is education and jobs, and the other is this collaboration across academic, public-private sector, and Brianna was a great setup from a standpoint of jobs and you know, what we're doing here in this region and more broadly. So this Catherine and Jim, I'm going to kind of bundle these a little bit, and maybe we chunk these up. I'll do 3 segments, kind of chunk them up into 5-minute segments. We'll run a little bit over if that's okay with everybody. We'll kind of target to wrap up at 3:10. First of all, Catherine points out that there's often in the narrative in our community and very broadly, there's a concern about loss of jobs due to tech. And in particular in the manufacturing sector. And a lot of what we've learned has certainly been contrary to that concept. But can you discuss some examples of new jobs in manufacturing and then and kind of what those look like? And then building on that, James says, you know, how are we doing in terms of educating the workforce and giving students the ability to understand the opportunity in this segment of our industrial community here, and how are we doing with that?
Well, I would say, Farhad, if you could maybe speak to the first part of this, that would be, I think you've probably got the broadest kind of view across the state. What would you, how would you answer that question?
I think it's a good question. I think given the level of innovations that's being created, we're continuously seeing upscaling of jobs. So that's certainly the focus for us, is that, for example, the kind of jobs that we are seeing is photonic technicians. And what they do is completely different than what was happening before. We're attaching fibers to a photonic integrated circuit. That requires different set of expertise, if you will, and the know-how. And what we're doing basically, how are we developing that workforce? We have working with MIT and UMass system to develop courses that particularly address that issue. You know, how do you develop the next generation technologies workforce? We can point to examples like in robotics, for example, the roboticists, that these technologies are now, and how do you work with a robot? So we call them basically cobots, the collaborative robots. So in this case of, for example, the folks who are doing CNC machining now beginning to actually code for actions that the robot take in the assembly line or something like that. So that's the kind of transformational change that we see in jobs. And then how we are addressing those is really with all the educational opportunities we're providing with our programs, M2I2 and others at community college and high schools. And I want to mention that we're going to tune in. We're going to have an exciting program announcement in the next couple of weeks that will go exactly to the question that's being asked here.
Are there obstacles to the educational side that you can particularly point out that we need to be addressing, either at the high school level or at the the college or graduate levels?
I think the obstacle that we see, I don't know whether it's going to be an obstacle, is really getting the message out that there are opportunities, there are programs available to address the kind of jobs that they're looking for. Is promoting, and I think this is another aspect that we might need to do a much better job of branding and marketing of what these jobs are about. So that the message is out there that if you want to go into be a technician, here's a program. And we're doing a lot with the mass hire boards, and as well as the academic institutions that an example like Jeff is part of that. We are putting the message across that these courses are available and they can utilize.
So I'm going to just later on to the first part of this question. One of the examples of robotics and evolving robotics for applications came across the M2I2 group to support the development of robotics that could handle soft materials. You can imagine robots are great at putting windshields into cars and doors and whatnot on assembly lines. But the real challenge became, well, how do you use a robot to help process fish? It turns out that New Bedford has a thriving fishing industry, but most of the fish that comes in gets shipped over to China, gets processed over there, and then shipped back again. If we could figure out ways to do the processing here, we would create a number of jobs in a processing plant right there when the boat comes in off the water. So I think just a poignant example, I think, of what's happening right now with developing technology and creating some new jobs. Jeff?
That was a good example.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm wondering on the education front, do you have anything to add?
So the education front is, it's got the ranges of undergrad, graduate. So a lot of what we see are the grad students. So they're already embedded in a science and technology background. They're in there. Whoops, excuse me. They're already pretty well embedded in a technology aspect where they're developing and innovating. I think it's the undergrads need a little bit more focus, so new curricula there, and laboratory training also could be a big benefit. And I think the real challenge is how do you start to introduce this at the end of high school and at the first year of either a 2-year college or a 4-year college. So that's maybe where some focus on the curricula side and possibly hands-on opportunities as well.
Brianna, do you manage to get out to high schools to make any presentations, or do you connect in with some of the, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm a part of the Flying Cloud Institute. So I work with the younger generation. So I'm with a lot of the actually elementary school kids, and we go in and we just introduce them to science and technology and kind of get them excited about that. And then I kind of commonly will go back to my college and speak to them about manufacturing, because we do get exposure, but I think in biomedical engineering specifically, we don't necessarily truly understand as a college student what that manufacturing pathway looks like. And then we do connect frequently with Berkshire Community College and have some good connections there.
Yeah, I was going to say that BCC, I think, is very active in this area and trying to get the word out, and also trying to provide a pathway to more advanced degrees. And they're a critical link in doing this. And also a very important member of the Berkshire Innovation Center, which now also hosts an annual robotics competition for middle school and grade school kids. So Bob, back to you perhaps.
Yes, great. Getting to this second category, Paul asked, can you discuss the role of technology transfer where university-funded research is transferred to startups? How does that ecosystem work? And does the university get involved at all in licensing new products or any of the capitalization, venture capital at all? Or how do those pieces come together for a startup in this space?
Jeff, I'm thinking maybe you've got.
Yeah. So I can. So basically, most academic institutions have some targeted focus on innovation and IP development and licensing. UMass has been getting better at it. Historically, they've not been that good, but more recently, there's some focus on specific faculty that have done well with intellectual property and patents, and then students who really want to start up a company. Places like MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, institutions I've dealt with historically get it. They've been doing this for decades. A lot of other universities around the country, the UMass Medical, I believe, has a big track record. And if you look at the licensing that comes out of that, it's pretty appreciable. So that can be done, and really it's training of the educators, of the faculty. Many of them are all about writing papers, advancing their career. But once you understand the patent process, the kind of application area of what you're doing, and put a little emphasis on that, there's more creative ways to cultivate that at academic institutions. And certainly that's an area too where companies come in and look for that. Although many are concerned about licensing agreements, what that means. I've done this at my prior job as well for many years successfully, but again, it's really getting it out there and working with the licensee to make it effective and make it successful. That's if what you do doesn't ever get to being a product, they're not going to continue to pay license fees on that. So there is a benefit to working with them to make it be what it's supposed to be in the long run. So
there's just actually a separate question from Ellie that directly relates to this. Jeff, you could take a crack at it and others can chime in. Is there a cost to a private company? Is there that utilizes the services of UMass or other educational institutions for purposes of launching enterprises or as an incubator?
So in the facility I'm in, we actually have a collaboratory space. So a company can come in with their own IP, rent that space for a very modest fee, and work with us at our rates to develop their product. If it's us doing the innovation, that's again where you would have more of a kind of a collaborative license agreement. From a legal standpoint, we can't predict or give them terms of a license agreement ahead of time before it's actually created. Or in that case, we can, but we can't accept federal funding, or there's legal aspects of this. But the bottom line is we're happy to work with companies. We're happy to direct them to faculty that we know have either know-how or licensable intellectual property that may be useful to them, and or come and give them minimal guidance, but at least direction to help develop their intellectual property as well. So we don't have any agenda. We just want to help companies be successful and not necessarily take everything away from them, which if you're from the small company in particular, or even large companies, they're very concerned about, ownership of IP and or losing rights. A last comment on that is university has certain intellectual property where they will give non-exclusive royalty-free licensing on many things. And so that is something that's always worth looking into. But again, if your competitor gets it and does something better with it that you don't like, you're kind of stuck there as well. So exclusivity is always important depending on the value of the market and the potential product.
Doug, maybe we're reaching sort of the end of our time, which is unfortunate, but if it's okay with you, I was just going to suggest that maybe we go around the horn of the panel, literally for everybody to spend, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute max. If we were to dial this out 3 years, let's say, in the smart manufacturing and advanced manufacturing arena here in the Berkshires, what's it going to look like?
Well, let's start with Justin. 3 years.
3 years from now, we're going to be on top of the world. No, well, maybe, hopefully. I think we're going to see a substantially more integrated hand-holding between education and industry. There's a huge lag between education and industry because industry just moves faster, right? We figure stuff out, turns into a product, and then, the world's changed before it becomes relevant again. So I think the world of, internships as only a senior in college, or junior in college are rapidly changing. So getting I think it's an obvious answer, but I think the world is going to be pushing people towards specializing or at least picking a sector that they're interested in a lot earlier and then tailoring their education to it rather than doing the former where you study it and then try to find something that fits it.
Thank you. Brianna, I think that your view on this is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so when I think about Boyd in particular, every year that I reflect back, so much has changed here, and for the better. And it's kind of crazy to think in the growth that we can accomplish in 1 year. So I think countywide, Stephen Boyd, the president here, he's having a lot of great conversations about just what Justin's talking about, that integration of school and education, and really what the industry needs, and making sure that we're tailoring it correctly. I know here we're hiring a lot of people right now for that kind of middle skill level, which doesn't require a bachelor's degree. Associates or high school that has a focus in manufacturing is really what for our company is going to help us grow. So I really think that the county's kind of getting behind that. And so I like to think that the school systems are really going to support that.
Great. And Jeffrey, what would be your answer to that question?
So I'm in line with what Brianna just said. I think that what we're going to see is a combination of a little more excitement around manufacturing jobs starting to infiltrate into the high school ranks, and people making better choices in terms of what degrees they want in 4-year colleges and 2-year colleges, and jumping into the workforce in a more meaningful way. I think in 3 years, we're going to see some traction on that. Right now, it's, we obviously have a different situation, but, getting people to think beyond their social media, frankly, has been challenging, right? I think a lot of people don't think about careers until they're well into college, and I feel bad for whoever's paying that tuition bill. And I knew a lot of people when I was there, and I don't think that has changed that much, if anything worse. So
getting to start, starting in a little earlier is certainly a great idea. And Farhad, I'm sort of, sort of broadly, but also I think there's a question out there when we look at this I-90 corridor that you're talking about with your leaps and everything. Albany just sits, right over a mountain over here. I'm wondering, is there a way to plug Berkshire County into this major initiative?
Absolutely. And I think, as I said, we have a very, we will be announcing another center soon, and that happens to be right in your backyard. So wait for that excitement that's going to be announced soon. So that center, along with the activity, we hope to bring the kind of collaboration that we see here, as well as companies such as obvious Boyd Technologies and EMA are going to be a key part of this effort. But we're certainly going to have this message of that manufacturing is exciting to get into, because we're talking about AI, we're talking about robotics, we're talking about photonics. These are exciting and technologies that to be thinking about.
Well, you hit on the big word there, collaboration. I think this is one of the areas where, when we look globally, I think it's an area where we're sort of leading in the United States. And we've really sort of evolved this thinking around the innovation ecosystem. And I think over the course of the next 3 years, we'll see that begin to sort of translate into greater economic activity and particularly in the advanced manufacturing sector. I also would say that the lessons that we are learning during the pandemic, where we have to hold sessions like what we're doing today instead of all being in person. I mean, there are challenges with pulling off a quality event when you do it remotely like this, but yet the friction for actually attending is a lot lower. My son yesterday was taking his final exams while he was on an island in Seattle. You just couldn't have done that stuff in the past. And I think when it comes to collaboration, that these learned sort of habits are gonna sort of bear some additional fruit that we're not quite thinking about yet. So that's what I have to say on it.
That's great. Well, listen, thank you all very, very much. Doug, Farhad, Jeff, Brianna, Justin, Ben, this has been a super session and very informative on all levels. I just want to remind everyone that next Thursday, October 22nd, same time, same channel, we're going to be talking about education and transformative technology. So please join us again then. In the meantime, thanks to all and have a good week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.